Ivy and Bean. What's the Big Idea? By Annie Barrows and Sophie Blackall. Hot and bothered. The next day, no one rushed to sit on Colorado. Doucet sat in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean without pretending he was drowning. Ivy and Bean flopped onto Wisconsin together. Ms. Arubitate was explaining capital letters with her big purple pen. The first letter at the beginning of a sentence was always capital. Okay, thought the second grade. The first letter of a person's name or a place was always capital too. Fine, thought the second grade. Whatever. Ms. Arubitate put the cap on her big purple pen and looked at the children on the rug. Well, she said, I know something that will pep you up. Emerson School is going to have a science fair. No, groaned Bean. I hate science, said Emma. Drew and Eric nodded. Ms. Arubitate raised her eyebrows. I'm confused, boys and girls, she said. I thought you liked science. No, we hate it, Zuzu said. It's awful. But, said Ms. Arubitate, what about fish prints? You liked making fish prints, didn't you? Those were okay, said Emma. And our insect studies, Ms. Arubitate asked. You liked those, didn't you? That cicada was cool, said Margalie. Remember the hissing cockroach? Said Drew. That was cool, too. What about marine reptiles? Said Ms. Arubitate. Elasmosaur and plesiosaur. And mesosaur, yelled Eric. Eric loved mesosaur. Then why do you say you hate science? Asked Ms. Arubitate. Global warming, chanted the second graders. Global warming? Asked Ms. Arubitate. Didn't you listen, Ms. Arubitate? Bean said. The whole world is going to turn into a desert. The polar bears are going to die out, said Ivy. And the frogs, said Emma. And newts, said Eric. Squishy things are in trouble. All the animals are in trouble, said Drew. And it's all our fault, said Bean. That was the worst part. Ms. Arubitate was quiet for a moment. She looked like she was thinking hard. Then she said, Boys and girls, I'm hearing that you are very worried about global warming. I'm feeling sorry that you're worried, but I'm also feeling glad that you care so much about the Earth. People who care as much as you do are the people who will find solutions to the problem. The second graders looked at each other. Solutions? There were solutions? Right now, scientists all over the world are trying to find ways to stop global warming. Science is the solution, not the problem. That's why I'm sad when I hear you say you hate science. They should work harder, said Drew. Ms. Arubitate looked at him. Do you remember, Drew, when we talked about cave dwellers? Some of you thought cave dwellers were stupid because they didn't know how to build houses. And we talked about how people have to experiment in order to make their lives better, remember? Yeah, said Emma. We decided maybe cavemen got the idea for houses from watching termites. Exactly, said Ms. Arubitate. We get ideas, we experiment, and we find solutions to our problems. That's what scientists do. But they haven't found the solution to global warming, said Ivy. They haven't found one perfect solution, but they've found lots of little ones, like cars that don't pollute so much. Each little solution is a step toward a big solution, said Ms. Arubitate. Do you think the first house built by a caveman was perfect? No, it probably collapsed. It caved in, yelled Doucet. Eric and Drew fell over laughing. Thank you, Doucet, said Miss Arubitate. And the second house probably caved in, too. But each time the cave dwellers learned something new, and in the end they built a house that stayed up. They were cave scientists. Scientists don't give up if something doesn't work perfectly. They look for new ideas to make it better. She smiled. And that reminds me of you. You children have new ideas all the time, which means you're already good scientists. Each one of you could come up with an idea to fight global warming. But we're kids, said Vanessa. You're kid scientists, said Ms. Arubitate firmly. What we need for this problem is new ideas, and you kids are great at that. Yeah, whispered Bean. She was great at new ideas. She had them all the time. So, I think we have our theme for the Emerson School Science Fair, don't you? Asked Ms. Arubitate. Ideas that fight global warming. Oh, this is going to be great, thought Bean. If she stopped global warming, she'd be the most famous person in the world. Do you win anything if your idea is the best? She called out. Ms. Arubitate smiled. You sure do. You win a special certificate of scientific achievement from the principal. Sheesh, Bean had been hoping for money. But she would fight global warming anyway. Icebound. This would be a lot easier if we had some of those white coats, Bean said. She speared her bagel on her thumb and took a chomp out of it. Lab coats, said Ivy, licking her cream cheese. And lots of little bottles of chemicals. What if there was just this one chemical that would stop global warming and we discovered it? Bean said dreamily. She imagined herself holding up a test tube full of shimmering pink stuff. Ta-da, she was saying. All around her, other scientists clapped in amazement. Don't you remember? Ivy interrupted her dream. My mom said she was never going to get me another chemistry set after what happened last time. You have some potion ingredients, don't you? Asked Bean. Ivy was going to be a witch when she grew up, so there were usually potion ingredients in her room. I've got some dead flies and some baking soda, said Ivy, and some brick powder. Bean sighed. I don't think any of those is going to cure global warming. Me neither, said Ivy. But what will? We have to think, said Bean. Ivy thought and sucked cream cheese out of her hair. Bean thought and squeezed her head between her hands until her eyeballs almost popped out. There's recycling, I guess, she said. We could show how it's good for the earth. But everyone already knows about recycling, said Ivy. We're supposed to have a new idea. They thought some more. Bean's dad came into the kitchen. He looked at their thinking faces and sat down at the table next to Bean. What's happening, kiddalunks? We need an idea to stop global warming, said Bean. Easy, he said. Get rid of cars. Dad, we're 7. We don't have cars. We need something we can do for a science fair. Oh, said her dad. He leaned against the back of his chair and frowned. For several moments it was quiet. Suddenly he snapped his fingers. Okay, got one. You guys can make posters that remind people to turn out the lights. You know, to save electricity. You could have a slogan like, lights out when you're out. He smiled at them proudly. Isn't that good? Bean and Ivy exchanged looks. Yeah, Dad, said Bean. Great, thanks. Well, he said, I'm going to go clean out the drains. Okay, said Bean. Ivy and Bean watched as he left the room. Then they looked at each other and shook their heads. That has got to be the most boring idea ever, said Bean. You know grown-ups, said Ivy. They don't have very good imaginations. Ivy and Bean began thinking again. What if began Ivy and stopped. She stared at the refrigerator. Ice cubes! Bean looked at the refrigerator too. What about them? Think, how do you cool down a hot thing? Asked Ivy. Ice cubes! If we could put ice cubes up in the sky, the air would get colder, right? Right, said Bean. But how are we going to put ice cubes in the sky? Asked Ivy. Well, in real life, they'd probably have to drop them out of airplanes, but for the science fair, we could just throw them up in the air to show what we mean. Bean slapped her hand on the table. Great idea! And easy, too. A minute later, they were running out Bean's back door with all the ice cubes they could find in the freezer. The next minute, they were running back inside to get a thermometer from the bathroom closet. And the minute after that, they both stood on Bean's trampoline, holding bowls full of ice cubes. The higher we can throw them, the more they'll cool down the weather, Ivy said, looking at the sky. On your mark, said Bean. Get set, go. Together they began to bounce, higher and higher, higher than they had ever been before. I can see my house, yelled Ivy. I can see the North Pole, shouted Bean. But that reminded her of what they were supposed to be doing. You ready? Yup. Ivy scooped up a handful of ice. We have to do it quick. Together they boinged as high as they could get and hurled the ice up into the air. Quick, quick, get the thermometer, yelled Bean. Flinging her bowl to the ground, Ivy snatched the thermometer and bounced up again, waving it in the air. It's definitely cooler up there, said Bean, collapsing onto the trampoline. What's it say? Ivy slowed down and peered at the thermometer. I don't know, she said. It looks like 37. That's cold, said Bean. I can feel it. Look it, I'm shivering. Ivy looked. Bean's backyard gate swung open. Nancy and her friend Misha came in, giggling. They stopped when they saw Ivy and Bean. Nancy looked at the lawn. Why is there ice all over the backyard? She asked. Bean would never have told her in a million years, but Ivy didn't have an older sister, so she came right out and answered, Global warming. What? Asked Misha in a snippy voice. She was Nancy's meanest friend. We're curing global warming, said Ivy, with ice cubes. Nancy and Misha burst out laughing. Whatever, said Nancy. Come on, Mishy. But just so you know, guys, ice cubes won't stop global warming. The sun is stronger than 1 billion ice cubes. And besides, making ice cubes uses up energy. Duh. No offense, but that's like the dumbest thing I ever heard, sneered Misha. Bean looked down at the trampoline. It was covered with melting ice cubes. Quickly, she grabbed up an armful and tossed them at Nancy and Misha. Hailstorm, she yelled. Watch out! At least it was fun to watch them run.